Hello class, welcome back to EDUC 1300. In our last lesson, we discussed how our amygdala and life scripts can drag us off course by reacting with pre-programmed and possibly outdated responses. I concluded that lesson by saying that the only way we can combat those outdated beliefs was to adopt new habits and behaviors. However, before we could do so, we needed to be self-aware of our actions. Also, and whether we realize it or not, our unconscious personal scripts and cultural programs steal our sense of personal power and drag down our self-esteem. When these forces take over, we lose control of our lives. In fact, few things affect self-esteem more than our sense of personal power. When we feel like mere passengers in life, with no apparent choice in where we're going, our self-esteem shrivels. However, when we're the pilots of our own destiny, our self-esteem grows. Until we revise our limiting scripts, we're less likely to achieve some of our most cherished goals and dreams. That's why realizing when we're off course can be a blessing in disguise. By identifying the self-defeating patterns of thought, emotions, and behaviors that got us off course, we may be able to discover and revise the underlying core beliefs that are sabotaging our success. The good news is, we are not stuck with our personal scripts or cultural programming. We can recreate ourselves. We can keep what works and change what doesn't. Therefore, by revising outdated scripts, we can get back on course and dramatically improve the outcomes and experiences of our lives. So as we begin this lesson, I'd like for each of you to think about these questions. First, what personal rules do you have that dictate the choices you make daily? Secondly, which of these rules help you create high self-esteem? As you think about your responses to these questions, I'd like to point out that it's only when you consciously accept, revise, or replace some cultural rules are you likely to feel completely at peace with yourself. The same is true of rules embedded in your personal scripts. In fact, psychologist Virginia Satir stated, "We are all living by rules, but the important issue is, have we chosen our own rules?" Therefore, we need to hold on to those rules that are keeping us on course and revise or eliminate those that are not. Therefore, if you've been struggling in college, you can choose to revise your script and adopt new rules for success. In fact, the author of your textbook has polled thousands of college instructors, and consistently, those instructors have identified 3 rules as the keys to success. So, if you want to get back on course as a student, here are 3 rules you should adopt to be successful in college. The first rule is to show up. In other words, you need to commit to attending every class from beginning to end. After all, how can you be successful if you're not there? Studies have shown that a direct correlation exists between attendance and grades. For example, at Baltimore City Community College, a study found that on average, as absences went up, grades went down, especially in introductory classes. Additionally, an Arizona State University business professor conducted his own study and discovered his students' grades went down 1 full letter grade for every 2 classes missed. Therefore, showing up is crucial to success and should be the first rule you adopt to get back on course in college. Secondly, commit to doing your best work on all of your assignments and make sure you submit them on time. However, remember that to truly do your best work, you'll need to operate in Quadrant 2 and avoid submitting any last-minute, underprepared assignments completed as you feverishly dove into Quadrant 1. Finally, participate actively in class. College is not a spectator sport. Come to class prepared, listen actively, take notes, and ask questions. Think deeply about what is being said and determine how you can apply your coursework to achieve your goals and dreams. However, don't just stop at these 3 basic rules. Remember, exceptional students not only follow these 3 basic rules of success, They also create their own rules for college and in life. So, as you think about rewriting your outdated scripts and adopt new rules for success, consider these questions. First, what additional rules could you use that could help you become more successful in college? Secondly, to follow these rules, do you have to rewrite any previous scripts, attributes, or injunctions? Simply put, each rule you create is only your strong intention. You'll always break your own rules if something of a higher value demands it. Let me say that again. Each rule you create is only your strong intention. You'll always break your own rules if something of a higher value demands it. Therefore, at each fork in the road, the key to success is being aware of each choice that leads you to the future you want. When you act as a creator, you make choices uncontaminated by your past or cultural constraints, which are defined by your own rules of conduct. Therefore, in spite of your previous scripts, you can overcome acting from an outdated script and become the creator of your own goals and dreams. That's all for this lesson. See you next time.